Alright, now let's move on to our next problem, which is asking us for the square root of negative 81. So this question actually has two probable solutions depending on your schooling level. If you're like in primary school or middle school, you look at the square root of negative 81, you probably just want to say that the solution doesn't exist because you can't square root a negative number. But if you're if you're depending on what your teacher teaches you at the school and what you have learned recently, you can just say the solution doesn't exist because you can't square root a negative number, saying that is completely sufficient. But if you are learning about imaginary numbers and complex numbers in high school, saying an answer like that in like a complex number or imaginary number quiz is probably not acceptable, and you will probably mark wrong. So let's do the second case of imaginary numbers. So how do we do those problems if you have learned imaginary numbers or complex numbers? Is that you just you know that negative 81 is negative 1 multiplied by 81, and then you split the square root sign into both of its factors, and you have the square root of negative 81 is equals to square root of 1 times 81. And for 81 here, the square root of 81 is just 9, and the square root of negative 1 actually has a special name, which is I. So I is called the imaginary number, which just like its name, is not real, or it's not like on the real number line. So it is actually part of the complex numbers, because the square root of negative 1 actually doesn't exist as like values in the system of the real number. But when we extend the real numbers to include more numbers, we have the complex numbers, and the square root of negative 1, or I, is kind of the foundation of the complex numbers, which is very important in like a lot more advanced math, or a lot more advanced or a lot more advanced physics. It's used very often and happens a lot very often in how we try to explain the natural world. So basically 9 has a value of the square root of negative 1, and imaginary number square root of negative 1. So right over here for our problem, we just write down that is I and times 9, and 9 is just square root of negative 1. That's all there is to it for the sake of this question. So the square root of negative 81 is 9i. And this is our simple solution for this question, or this is our solution for this question. And again, we'll see what the simple solution says. Alright, they did it correctly, and they just wrote down the solution, or they just wrote down 9i for like the solution. So let's just say the solution is right. Great. And let's press the button that the solution is correct. Now let's move